All right, so jumping right into it, there's been a lot of talk about Iran's nuclear program lately, and you sent over that New York Times piece
Yeah.
about it, and it really tackles this phrase we've all heard, I feel like, a million times. Iran, weeks away from a bomb. Like, we see that everywhere.
Right. And, it's interesting you bring that up because there's a lot of misunderstanding around that phrase.
Okay.
One of the things this article does really well is it makes a distinction between having enough fuel for a nuclear weapon, which is what that weeks away usually refers to,
Mm-hmm.
and the very complicated process of actually building one, building a weapon.
So it's kind of like having all the ingredients for a cake on your counter.
Yes.
Like, it doesn't mean you're going to have a cake in 15 minutes, right?
Exactly. And the article, it really drives this point home that just having the fuel isn't the whole picture.
It seems like it's trying to kind of get us away from thinking about just that one step as like the be all end all.
It really digs into the details, and actually it quotes several top experts, people who've worked in these top nuclear labs,
Wow.
and they suggest that it would take Iran, realistically, months, probably even a year, to actually turn that material, even if they had enough, into a weapon.
Wow. That's a far cry from a few weeks.
Yeah.
Really puts it into perspective. You know, I think a lot gets lost in translation when we just hear those short little sound bites on the news.
Yeah, for sure. And this article's doing the work, right? It's really diving into what actually happens
Yeah.
inside a nuclear weapon facility.
Yeah, and that's something I wanted to ask you about because it's not as simple as some people might think, right?
Not at all. Frankly, it's a pretty chilling thought to even contemplate.
Right.
You're talking about incredibly precise engineering,
Yeah.
specialized knowledge,
Yeah.
and then even beyond just thinking about what the weapon itself could do, there are real dangers in the building process itself.
Yeah, and you kind of touched on it there. When we talk about the dangers involved, a lot of folks probably just jump right to thinking about, like, what happens if one of these things goes off?
Right.
But this article in the Times, it really got me thinking about the risks to the people who would even be involved in the process of building a weapon like this.
Yeah, and what really struck me reading it was how it sort of forced you to confront those hidden dangers that maybe you wouldn't think about right away.
Right.
Like, we focus so much on, the potential for, like you said, the actual explosion and the devastation.
Right.
But what about the people in the factories, the scientists? Like,
Yeah, they're right there in it.
exactly.
There's this whole section about what they call advanced metallurgy, which, I mean, it sounds kind of cool.
Right. It sounds very sci-fi.
Yeah, until you read on and realize they're talking about, like, shaping uranium and
Right.
bomb components. And it's like, how do you even...
Yeah. How do you even begin to do that safely?
Yeah.
And they make it clear, like, this is incredibly dangerous stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, they even say that workers in these facilities, even with, presumably some kind of protective gear,
Yeah.
would be at a really high risk of lung cancer just from handling the materials,
Wow.
just from being around it. And it's not just lung cancer, right? We're talking about exposure to radiation, to isotopes. Some of these things, they stay dangerous for, like, decades.
It's kind of a chilling thought, honestly. Like, this article really does a good job of, I don't know, making it real,
It does.
It's easy to get caught up in the abstract when we talk about nuclear weapons.
Sure.
But this really brings it home, like the human cost involved, even before you even get to the point of someone, like, using one of these things.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And that's a point I really want to emphasize here. Building one of these weapons is just, it's a huge undertaking
Yeah.
on so many levels. And, all of this is happening under the watchful eye, at least we hope, of the international community,
Right.
which brings us to the IAEA. Right.
Right. Yeah. So it's not as simple as like, oh, they have the fuel. Watch out, everybody. It's like even getting to that point is just the beginning of this whole other complex, kind of scary process.
Yeah. And dangerous. Right. We've talked about the risks, and it's all happening, or at least we assume it would, with the IAEA watching pretty closely.
Right. The IAEA, they're the ones keeping tabs on all of this in Iran, right?
Exactly. They're like the international watchdogs in this whole thing.
Yeah.
In this article, it does point out that according to their reports, and, we assume U.S. intel as well, Iran isn't actually testing weapon designs right now.
Okay. That's good to know, at least.
Yeah, important detail.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting. They suggest that Iran might actually be aiming for multiple nukes.
Wait, really? Multiple? Why would they, like, what's the thinking there? I mean, even one of these things, it's like, that's a huge deterrent.
Right, you'd think so, but it's about more than just having one. It's about the strategy, the bigger picture. If their goal is to really, change the game in the Middle East, just having one, it might actually make them more of a target.
Oh, interesting. Like someone might try to take them out before they could even use it.
Exactly. But if they have a few, well, now it's a whole different ballgame. Suddenly, the risk of retaliation is way higher.
Makes you wonder how other countries are viewing all of this.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if Iran were to actually get a nuclear weapon, forget multiple for a second, just one, how does that change everything? Alliances, military spending, the whole region could be reshaped.
Wow. Yeah, it's a lot to wrap your head around.
It really is.
Yeah.
And this New York Times piece, it's really just scratching the surface.
It does feel like we're just at the tip of the iceberg here.
Exactly. And the more we learn, the more questions come up, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, what happens if Iran gets a bomb? How does the Middle East change? How did the whole world change? Those are things we all got to be thinking about.
No doubt. Well, on that cheery note, it sounds like we've got our work cut out for us, keeping up with all of this. But I think the big takeaway here is, like you said at the beginning, that weeks to a bomb thing. It's catchy, but it doesn't tell the whole story.
Not even close.
Yeah.
We have to look deeper, right? Think about the motivations, the risks, the global implications. And this article has definitely given us a lot to unpack.
It has. So, to everyone listening, stay curious, folks. Do your research because this is something that affects us all.